Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Tash and I'm the owner of the sewing pattern brand NH Patterns. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a sew along tutorial for my newest pattern, the Susie skirt. So the Susie skirt is a simple A-line skirt. It is high-waisted and has front pockets. It has a centre back invisible zip to fasten and it doesn't have a lining, so it is designed for more mid to heavier weight fabric, something that holds its structure well, like a dress weight wool, not like a coating weight wool, that might be a little bit too heavy, but like a dress weight wool, a wool suiting, other suiting fabrics, kind of heavier weight cottons, maybe even a denim. While this pattern wasn't designed for knits, you could also use a stable knit, so something that's not going to stretch out of shape, that's going to keep its shape throughout, something like a ponte knit. You shouldn't need to adjust the sizing too much for something like that, but you may wish to. There's not that much stretch in a ponte knit, so you might be able to use that without making any adjustments, but you could always make it to your normal size and take it in a little bit if you do find it just stretches a little bit too much. You could also use a lighter weight fabric. Now this isn't designed for a lighter weight fabric, however some people that tested this pattern did find it worked really well. Something like a silk or a viscose would be lovely for the summer. It'd be nice and swishy, but obviously it's going to give you a completely different look. If you go for something lighter weight, just bear in mind that A, it doesn't have a lining, so you don't want it to be too see-through, and secondly, it's going to be more of a drapey, flowy skirt if you go for a lighter weight fabric. This skirt is available in UK sizes 4 to 32, and you can find it in the description box down below. That's all you really need to know for now, so let's get sewing. Before we cut or sew the skirt, we need to assemble the pattern. Start by printing the first page only at 100% scale, then measure your test square. If your test square measurement is correct, then continue to print the rest of the pages. You can see here that I have printed only one size. This pattern is layered, so you can print only the sizes you need. Once you've printed all of your pages, cut along the bottom and right hand sides of your border. You only want to cut two sides as it will make it easier to take together. You could cut the top and left if you prefer, just try to keep it consistent amongst all the pages. Once your borders are cut, match your pages using the numbered and lettered semicircles. Match the edges up as accurately as possible and then tape in place. I love using Scotch tape for this as it's clear, matte and can be drawn or written over. Once all your pages are taped together, it should look a little like this. You can now go ahead and cut out your pattern. When all of your pieces are cut, you should have a back skirt, front skirt, waistband, pocket and pocket facing pieces. To make this skirt, you will need your main fabric. In my case, I am using a wool blend. I'm not sure on the exact composition of this one, but it's a lovely weight. You'll also need some lightweight, fusible interfacing. This is optional, but I do recommend it. You'll also need a 9-inch invisible or concealed zipper. And lastly, you'll need all of your normal sewing and cutting equipment, such as scissors, pins, and of course your thread and machine. Next, we'll move on to cutting your fabric. You can follow along the cutting plans in the instruction booklet for this, but they all start with folding your fabric right sides together, matching up the selvages. You can see here I have already folded mine in half. Start placing your pieces on your fabric according to the cutting plan. Your front skirt should be placed with the edge marked fold placed onto the fold of the fabric. We don't cut along the folded edge, so when we remove the pattern piece, the fabric will be double the pattern piece and reflected along the folded edge. Don't forget, you also need to make a small snip in the fabric on this piece to mark your notch. Next, move on to cutting your other pieces. My cutting may not align exactly with the cutting plan as I made them after filming this, but you can cut your fabric however you wish. Just lay out your pattern pieces first so you know you have enough fabric. When you are laying your pattern pieces out, just make sure your grain line follows the selvage of the fabric. You can use a measuring tape to get this perfect. Just measure from the grain line to the selvage at a few different points and adjust the pattern pieces as required. Make sure to notch your pocket facing in the same way you notch the front skirt. If you are using the 4 to 18 pattern, your waistband will be placed on the fold. You can see here I've placed mine upside down. When I filmed this, my waistband piece was actually backwards, but I've since updated it in the pattern, so you can continue to use your pattern piece as normal. Here I cut one piece, then I took the pattern off the fabric and cut another piece. Now, if you're using interfacing, you will need to fold it in half and cut 2 more waistbands, unless you're using the 16 to 32 pattern. In this case, you don't need to fold and can simply cut 2 front pieces and 4 back pieces. Because the interfacing is so thin, I cut both waistbands at the same time, as it's much easier to manage this way. As well as your waistbands, I recommend cutting a few strips of interfacing at approximately 1 cm wide for your pocket openings. You'll need 4 of these strips, 2 for your front skirt and 2 for your pocket facings. Start by applying your interfacing to the wrong side of your waistband pieces. Place the side of the interfacing with the glue dots onto the waistband. Then cover with a pressing cloth and press your iron on top. Try to lift and press your iron rather than dragging, as you can accidentally move your interfacing out of place by doing this. Hold your iron in place for a few seconds, then lift and press the next section. Continue doing this until your whole waistband is interfaced. Moving on to your pocket facings, place the strips onto the wrong side of the fabric onto the edge of the pocket facing with the notch, making sure the side with the glue dots is facing the fabric. Apply your interfacing, then recut your notches. Repeat this on your front skirt. Because my fabric doesn't have much of a right and wrong side, I decided to put some orange tape on the wrong side so you can easily see which is which. We're now going to start sewing the pockets. Place your pocket facing onto your front skirt with right sides together, matching up the notched edge. Pin in place, then sew using a 1 cm seam allowance. Also, side note, you don't actually have to use a pressing cloth now. My fabric just sticks to the iron a bit, so that's why I'm still using it to press my seams. We're now going to understitch the pocket facing. To do this, we will be sewing the seam allowance down onto the pocket facing. We'll sew from the right side and sew a line of stitching right next to the seam we just sewed. This helps to keep the pocket facing from rolling out to the right side when worn. Gently pull the pocket facing and front skirt away from each other while sewing to keep the seam nice and flat. Trim any excess seam allowance, then turn your skirt to the right side. Place your pocket onto your pocket facing with right sides of the fabric together. Pin in place, then sew your pocket and facing together around the long curved edge as shown here. Sew your pocket and facing together using a 1 cm seam allowance, then overlock to neaten. If you don't have an overlocker, you could use a zigzag stitch instead. Fold your pocket back to the wrong side of the front skirt, along the seam you originally sewed when sewing your pocket facing to the skirt. Then press this in place. Pin the layers in place along the top and side edges, then stitch in place using a 5mm seam allowance. Overlock or zigzag stitch the side edges of your front skirt. Then take your back skirt and overlock the side edges of these too. With right sides together, place your back skirt on top of your front skirt. Sew together your front and back side edges using a 1.5 cm seam allowance. Press your side seams open. If you are using the 4 to 18 pattern with right sides facing, pin one of your waistband pieces to your skirt. I'd recommend pinning one end first, then the other, and then pinning evenly in between. If you are using the 16 to 32 pattern, you'll first need to sew your back waistband pieces onto your front waistband. Press the seams open, then pin your waistband to your skirt. Once your waistband is pinned in place, sew to the skirt using a 1 cm seam allowance. Press your seam allowance up towards your waistband, then trim the seam allowance by about half. Overlock the centre back edge of your skirt from the top of the waistband to the hem, making sure your seam allowance stays pressed up towards the waistband. You'll now need your zipper. For reference, the right side of the zipper is the side you can see here with the zipper pull. We need to place the right side of the zipper onto the right side of the skirt as shown here. You should place it so the top stopper of the zipper is slightly over 1 cm down from the top edge and so that the zipper teeth are 1.5 cm in from the centre back edge. Make sure the 1.5 cm is right up to the teeth as this is where we will be stitching. You're not measuring to the edge of the tape. Open up your zipper and then pin this side in place. To check your zipper is in the right way, it should look like this. Your zipper pull should be face down. We're going to sew right along the edge of the zipper teeth, so we need to change over our machine foot. I'm using a one-sided zipper foot here, but you could also use an invisible zipper foot. I'd normally recommend using an invisible zipper foot if you have one. Mine is just too small for this zip. Be careful when you get near the zipper pull and make sure it's out the way of your needle. Zip up your zipper, then mark where your waistband meets the zipper tape on the side we haven't sewn yet. This will help us align the zipper. Place the centre back edges of your skirt together and unzip your zipper. Turn the loose side of the zipper so that the right side is facing the right side of the fabric. Match up your marked point with the waistband on this side, and also make sure your zipper is 1.5 cm away from this edge. Pin in place, then switch your one-sided or invisible zipper foot to the other side. Then sew this side of your zipper in place. Zip up your zipper and make sure it's how you want it. Then turn your entire skirt inside out. We now need to finish this centre back edge. Pinch the end points of your zipper stitching together and then pin this point in place. It would make sense to start sewing exactly from this point all the way to the end, but this can actually look a little bit messy sometimes and can create holes if it's not perfect, so I like to start sewing just next to my original stitching. The first line I mark here indicates the end of my zipper stitching line, and the second line shows where I'll start sewing this next seam. This first line is 1.5 cm away from the edge, so you want to sew the second row of stitching as close as possible to keep the seam allowance as close to 1.5 cm as you can. You may find it easier to pull the end of the zipper out of the way as you sew. It would make sense to use a one-sided foot for this, but it can throw off your tension, so I just use my normal machine foot. Head back to the iron and press this seam open, then also press around the zipper from the right side. Your skirt's almost finished. Take your other waistband piece and overlock both short edges and the long bottom edge. Unzip your zipper, making sure you can see the centre back overlocked edge. With right sides together, match up the raw edge of your waistbands and the short overlocked edge of your second waistband with the centre back overlocked edge of your skirt. The waistband will go over your zipper. Pin in place on the side of the zipper teeth closest to the centre back edge. Then continue to pin together the entire way around the raw edges of the waistbands. When you get to the other side, you will place your waistband over the zipper and again pin the side of the zipper teeth that is closest to the centre back edge. Change your machine to a one-sided zipper foot and sew your waistband to your skirt along the pinned edge of the zipper teeth. Starting at one centre back edge, sew the top of your waistbands together using a 1 cm seam allowance. Be careful and use the hand wheel when sewing over your zipper. Trim your corners and then trim your seam allowance by about half to reduce bulk. Turn out your waistband and gently push out your corners. Turn your second waistband to the inside of the skirt and roll the seam between your fingers so the seam runs nicely along the top. Press in place. You can see how the second waistband covers the seam allowance nicely on the inside of the skirt. Turn the skirt to the right side and pin your waistbands together through the seam line. Once pinned, stitch in the ditch the entire way around to secure. You can see here how the stitching is barely visible from the right side but covers the waistband seam on the inside. We now need to hem the skirt. Overlock the entire hem edge and then turn up 1 cm and stitch into place. Give it one last press and then that's it, you're done.